What is going on? I am Matt O'Leary back with another live stream. Today, we are bringing on a special guest to discuss the upcoming game against the New York Giants. I'd like to welcome on Anthony Rivardo. He covers the Giants for Fireside Giants. Anthony, thank you so much for coming on with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this game on Saturday and appreciate you having me on the show.
Absolutely. Now, I got to be honest with you. I'm a little nervous for this game because it looks like the Jets will be playing their starters, and I'm not so sure the Giants are going with that same approach. So something about the second team offense and defense going up against the Jets first team, I just get some weird vibes, especially with the injury history in this game for both teams.
Yeah, the Giants are not playing their starters. That's the expectation, at least. They gave Daniel Jones and the first team a little bit of run last week. So going into this week, they're likely to rest all those guys and just get ready for the regular season. But you should see a couple of starters out there. I'm expecting to see Evan Neal, right tackle for the Giants, entering his second season. He's been struggling. He struggled a lot as a rookie. They're trying to get him ready for this regular season. He needs to take a big jump. So you might see him out there and maybe a couple other offensive linemen and slot receivers who are competing for spots in the starting lineup. But other than that, I think you're going to see Aaron Rodgers going up against a bunch of practice squad players.
Okay, see that makes me nervous a little bit because like these are guys who are trying to fight for a roster spot who are going to go that extra level where guys on the Jets first team offense, they're just trying to get in somewhat of a rhythm. Now I wouldn't expect to see the Jets first team offense out there for like a long time, maybe a couple series and then get off quick. But again, just something with this game in the back of my head. We've seen a couple guys go down. The Jets lost, Mark Sanchez in this game, Chad Pennington going back for the Giants, Jason Sehorn. That's a long time ago now. But this just the injury history in this game, it gets me a little bit.
Yeah, the Giants have thankfully been pretty healthy throughout training camp and preseason. They've gotten lucky. I mean, at this point last year, they had already lost one of their starting receivers to injury, a starting linebacker. So going into this game, they are healthy. But you're right in the sense that a lot of these practice squad guys are going to be playing balls to the wall, so to speak, because this is their last chance to make the roster or even make the practice squad. So there's definitely that element of these guys are going to be playing way harder than the Jets' first team offense.
Absolutely. Someone you mentioned was Evan Neal, who's expected to play at right tackle. He struggled a little bit as a rookie, but someone else who struggled was Andrew Thomas. Do you see a somewhat similar progression, maybe year over year, a little bit better? Or are you starting to hit the worry button on Evan Neal?
I mean, that's what we're hoping to see. It's kind of rare that you have a player struggle the way that they did as a rookie and turn into Andrew Thomas. He's arguably the best left tackle in the NFL outside of Trent Williams. So when you're looking at Evan Neal and how he could potentially progress, you like the Giants coaching staff. Brian Dable's great. I like Bobby Johnson, the offensive line coach. But with Neal, a lot of issues on his film last year, just some stuff that is teachable, correctable, but then there's other stuff where it's kind of football IQ based. And it's like, is he just not learning the NFL game fast enough? And that's what we saw in week 2 of the preseason. He had some dominant reps, pancaking linebackers against the Panthers, but then he also let up a sack, and it was because he failed to see a stunt coming. So that's really, as physically gifted as he is, 6'7", 350 pounds, moves like he's 250 pounds, right? Like Evan Neal is a specimen. But if he doesn't figure out how to play the game at the NFL level, he's never going to reach that full potential that's just lying out there for him.
Absolutely. And, something that I'm curious about from a Giants perspective heading into this game, are there any, like, I guess, positional battles that you're looking for to get, ironed out or figured out in this last preseason game here?
Yeah, one to keep a really close eye on is at wide receiver. Now, it's not necessarily a battle to crack the starting lineup. The Giants have their starting 3 to 4 receivers pretty much set in stone at this point, but they're holding 13 wide receivers on the roster right now, and they have to trim a lot of fat there. So they're either cutting down to 6 to 8 receivers. If they keep 8, that feels crazy because that's a lot of wide receivers to hold on a roster. But just because they have so many guys, and there's a couple that they don't want to land on the waiver wire, they might end up keeping 8. So at wide receiver, I'm keeping a close eye on Bryce Ford Wheaton, undrafted free agent out of West Virginia. That's a guy who, if he gets cut, he's getting claimed for sure. So the Giants are, honestly, I think they're afraid to cut him. They don't want him to land elsewhere. They want him at least on the practice squad. So Ford Wheaton is a guy I'm keeping a close eye on in this game against the Jets. But there's some other receivers as well. Cole Beasley, the veteran, looking for a roster spot. Jamison Crowder, who you're familiar with, is also looking for a roster spot. And then flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, slot cornerback is a big question mark as well. They've got Darnay Holmes, who's been starting there for the last several seasons, kind of a cut candidate at this point. And they've been toying with the idea of moving Adoree Jackson into the slot. So I'm not sure if maybe they give him some playing time. Again, they're not trying to play the starters, but he's never really played in the slot since his rookie season, which was 5 years ago at this point. So they might give him a little bit of playing time there to get him adjusted. But there's definitely some positions to keep an eye on. But those two, slot receiver and slot cornerback, are the top ones.
Yeah, you mentioned wide receiver. That was definitely something that I was going to bring up. And now for the Jets, after Corey Davis's surprise retirement yesterday, that's become a little bit of a storyline for the Jets. So we'll see if they have, some guys at the back end of their roster trying to make a push here to make the team. But you mentioned how many they were carrying. If you were to predict the 6 to 8 that they keep, who do you think those 6 to 8 guys end up being?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Locked in right now, you can lock in Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell. Those are your 3 starters, and Jalen Hyatt as well. That's your 4th. Wan'Dale Robinson's still on the PUP list, 2nd-round draft pick out of Kentucky last year. But if he gets healthy in time for the regular season, they're going to activate him. They feel like he can be that gadget Isaiah McKenzie type player that Dable had in Buffalo. So he'll be locked onto the roster regardless. I said Hyatt, and then you got to look at Cole Beasley versus Jamison Crowder if they want to keep one of those veterans. I think Sterling Shepard is safe, longest tenured Giants player, looks really good coming off of that injury, has been explosive in training camp. But again, injury history is pretty extensive with him. Some fans believe he might end up getting cut. I personally think he's safe. And I think that last wide receiver spot is just a 3-way race between Bryce Ford-Wheaton, that undrafted rookie I mentioned, Cole Beasley, and Jamison Crowder. And don't sleep on Colin Johnson either, 6'6" outside receiver. The Giants have a lot of short receivers. They like separators, guys who get open in space. But Johnson is like the only one outside of Isaiah Hodgins in the starting lineup. Out of all the backups, Johnson's the only one that has that size and NFL experience. Bryce Ford-Wheaton, 6'4", freak athlete, but he's very skinny. He's not NFL ready. He's a project. And again, keeping him on the roster is just strictly an attempt to keep him from landing on another team's roster.
There we go. Absolutely. So I see some familiar names here in the chat. Not that you would know Jets Forever, but Jets Forever was very big on the Jalen Hyatt train. He says Jalen Hyatt, offensive rookie of the year. If you have any questions in the chat, you could send them in, and we'll try to get to them here before the end of the show. But I'm sure you guys have to be thrilled with what you've seen from Jalen Hyatt so far in training camp in the preseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is a guy who, honestly, pre-draft, I was a little bit mixed on. We saw all 3 of the Giants' first 3 picks, Deonte Banks, John Michael Schmitz, and Jalen Hyatt. At one point or another, they were mock drafted to the Giants in the first round. So it was a really exciting draft for Giants fans. But Jalen Hyatt in the 3rd was considered our steal of the draft. And when he was mocked to them in the first round, I was always against that. But once he landed with the team in the 3rd round, I couldn't be more excited about it, because that's just tremendous value for a player like that. But he's very boom or bust in my eyes. I like to compare him to Deshaun Jackson, a player that gave me plenty of fits and heartbreaking moments as a Giants fan. But that's really what you see in Jalen Hyatt. He's got that vertical speed. He runs like a similar way to Deshaun Jackson. And while he might not ever be a number 1 wide receiver and a dominant force on the outside, he should always be a capable home run hitter, a number 2 receiver, someone who works in and out of the slot and just kind of runs those vertical routes. And if you look at that touchdown grab that he had against the Carolina Panthers, 2 plays earlier, he drops an easy one. Could have put the Giants right in the red zone, but he responds, killer mentality, responds 2 plays later, 33-yard touchdown. And he didn't even look like he had hit his full speed, and he just blew past that safety on the post corner route. So easy touchdown for him. And that's what we're hoping to see from him all season long. Just get out there, run some vertical routes, put a good shimmy at the top of the route, and then just break free for the touchdown.
Yeah, absolutely. I was surprised to see him there for the Giants in the 3rd round. I thought that was a home run. I really liked the Giants draft class this year. I was a big John Michael Schmitz fan going into the draft, and I would anticipate that it's trending towards him being the starter for them. How has he looked so far in training camp in the preseason?
He's looked great. I think he's locked in that starting position. At the start of camp, they said it was going to be a battle between him and Ben Bredesen and maybe Shane Lemieux. Lemieux has just been very poor, so he's probably not even going to make the roster at this point. And then Ben Bredesen has looked good, but they're going to want to start him at one of the guard spots because John Michael Schmitz has proven that he is ready to go day one, going to be an NFL starter as a rookie. So, but I do think it's interesting. You mentioned John Michael Schmitz, you were high on him, but you guys went ahead and took Joe Tippmann. I am curious to know how he's looked for the Jets so far.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I was going next. So Joe Tippmann it's been an interesting path for him. Initially in training camp, like when we first started back in July, he was listed as third on the depth chart. And then you had some fans panic and say like, I told you they should have taken John Michael Schmitz. And I like JMS. He was probably my favorite center in this draft class. But the reason why the Jets, I think anyway, they went with Joe Tippmann is because his athletic ability. Seeing him out in space in the run game has been really impressive. And he quickly rose up the depth chart. He pretty much skipped over the twos. They ended up moving Wes Schweitzer, who was the backup center, out to guard, and he's been getting reps over there. And then this past week before the game against Tampa Bay, he was splitting reps with Connor McGovern in the ones. He got banged up in in that game, his knee. So he's anticipated to be back for the start of the season, Salah said this week, but is not going to play in this game against the Giants. My guess, I think it's a pretty fair assumption that McGovern is going to start the season as the starting center. But with how quickly Tippmann's rose up the depth chart, it wouldn't shock me if by the time the Jets get to that Giants game coming out of the bye week, if Joe Tippmann's the starter at that point.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you want to see, a player just rise through the depth chart quickly like that. I like that you mentioned the first unofficial depth chart. We always see fans freak out about that. They lose their minds, go crazy. It's like Bijan Robinson being, the reserve running back on Atlanta's depth chart. You know that he's going to start. So it's always interesting to see fan reactions to those depth charts. But those rookies that are drafted in the second round, they're expected to play. So John Michael Schmitz, Joe Tippmann, I like Joe Tippmann. I thought he was a good prospect, but like you said, I also did prefer John Michael Schmitz. But what you said there about Tippmann and the athleticism, I think that's what they're banking on. When you compare those two prospects, I think the floor is much higher for a guy like John Michael Schmitz. He's just a sound football player. He's a 24-year-old rookie, so he's already walking in with plenty of football experience under his belt. But with Tippmann, his ceiling is much higher. He's got that athleticism. I could see him being a pretty special player for the Jets one day.
Yeah, 1000%. And just the thing that bugged me on that, the discourse from the fans, because you're right, the overreaction city last year, but with the first unofficial depth chart, Sauce Gardner wasn't listed as a starter. Like, obviously, everyone in the world knew he was going to end up starting for the team, but like, there's just the overreaction. Was that there was legitimately a discussion of people calling him a bust, and that it was a massive mistake that the Jets didn't draft John Michael Schmitz. And who knows, maybe that ends up being the case. But I just think coming away with that thought before either of those two guys even took a snap in the preseason or regular seasons a bit much for me. With all due respect to JMS, who I liked a lot, by the way.
No, I mean, you can have the most surefire prospect that you land with the first overall pick, and they can end up being, a real stinker for you. So it's true. I mean, you can't label anybody a bust. Even circling back to Evan Neal, Kayvon Thibodeau as well. We've had Giants fans and fans of other teams go crazy in our comment section calling Kayvon Thibodeau a bust because he only had 4 sacks. But he had 40 pressures, and he was one of the most disruptive rookies in the NFL last season. That's something to keep in mind. So it's too early to label him a bust. Evan Neal, the same thing. Yes, he struggled, but a lot of fans forget that he was playing left tackle in his final season at Alabama, then moved to right tackle in his first season in the NFL. And in fact, this is going to be only the first time in his football career that he's played the same position back-to-back seasons, because at Alabama, he played a different starting position every single year. So I'm expecting big things from a lot of our year 2 guys. I think there's a lot of young talent here, and it's just about watching it develop, but definitely too soon to call anybody a bust after 1 to 2 seasons.
Absolutely. Someone that I wanted to ask you about, because it feels like, at least for me, the one that got away, Jason Pinnock, now a starting safety for the New York Giants. He was a late round draft pick for the Jets at corner. Last year in his second season in the NFL, they were making the transition, trying to get him at safety. I thought he was looking good in training camp. And then, they tried to get a little cute and stash him on the practice squad, and the Giants claimed him. And I was upset when they did that. And he had I thought a really nice year for the Giants. What's your take on Pinnock and how he's looked?
Yeah, he was kind of a sleeper on the roster last year. He played, he didn't play a ton though, but now going into this second season with him on the team, we thought there was going to be a big position battle at that second safety spot. Xavier McKinney, he's locked in as the free safety, but that strong safety role, we thought it was going to be a battle between Pinnock, between Dane Belton, maybe Bobby McCain steps in here and tries to take it. And immediately Pinnock just took the starting job. It was like no competition. And then if you look at that first preseason game against the Detroit Lions, yeah, the Lions were playing a bunch of their backups in there. Pinnock was out there for the first few snaps, but he had an interception, a tackle for loss. He just dominated. He looked like he didn't belong on the field because he didn't. He's a starter. So I'm confident in Pinnock going into this season as the first team strong safety. And the way that he's played at camp, the way he looked in that preseason game, my expectations have now risen pretty highly for him. I think that he's going to be an impact starter for us. And yeah, unfortunately, you're right. The Jets got a little too cute there. It's the one that got away, but this guy is going to be pretty good for the Giants, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this year, their new safety project for the Jets, that is, so they had a UDFA last year, Tony Adams, who came in very small role, but looked pretty good. And now this year, going into his second year in the league, hasn't taken a snap in the preseason yet because he's already locked in a starting free safety job. So that eases the blow a little bit, but it's crazy to see some of the either late round or UDFA development so quickly on both those guys is impressive.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw the clip that Jason Pinnock, that interception that he made where he went completely viral a few weeks ago. He just showed some playmaking ability on that one. Backhanded, one-handed interception in the end zone to close practice. So you see a play like that, and you just get really excited about the potential of a player and their ability to get their hands on the football. And again, an interception week 1 of preseason, first drive. So we're really high on Pinnock right now, and definitely a little bit excited that the Jets let him go.
Another question from the chat. Pay Saquon. What's your stance on Saquon Barkley? Do you want to extend him or yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've kind of gone back and forth on it a few times. You look at Saquon, the impact that he's had on the Giants in particular. He did absolutely help them win games last season. You can't put it any other way. But then you also have to look at the running back market and the impact of running backs on a team. Those superstar running backs that get paid, they do not lead their teams to win championships. Barkley won games for the Giants last year, though. The game against Chicago, Daniel Jones goes down with a sprained ankle. Tyrod Taylor comes in, gets a concussion. They didn't have a quarterback to play. So what do? They go out there. Saquon Barkley runs the Wildcat offense. Daniel Jones stands next to the sideline as a receiver and does nothing. And Saquon Barkley single-handedly just carried them to victory in that game. So he's a special talent, and he does make an impact on this team. He's not your typical running back that you just never want to pay. You want to pay Saquon. You want to keep him here long term. However, the market is just showing that you can't do it right now. If you do, you're going to regret it within the first 2 years. So what the Giants were trying to do was get him on a contract where they could cut him after 2 seasons. What he wanted was at least security for those 2 seasons and a little bit more. So it was the guaranteed money that it came down to because playing on the franchise tag, it's 10.1 million guaranteed this season. If he gets tagged again next year, it's 12 million guaranteed. So the contract negotiations for Saquon had to start with at least 22 million in guaranteed money, but he didn't get that in those negotiations with the Giants, so they both just walked away. And then he took this weird incentive-laden 1-year deal. I think it benefits both parties. He gets this fully guaranteed contract, but the Giants were able to free up some cap space by giving him a big $5 million signing bonus. And now Saquon just has to make the playoffs and have a career year, and he gets an extra $1 million in the incentive. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But unfortunately, they didn't find the resolution this offseason, so they're just going to be doing it all over again next spring.
Yeah, that was what I was curious about because they're kind of kicking the can down the line a little bit, but I think it makes sense, like, as you said, for both sides this year. And it's so interesting, the market we're seeing, all around the league, guys, who are quality running backs. Josh Jacobs has gone through something similar. Jonathan Taylor is trying to get paid and is going to end up getting traded. I don't know what they have to do to change it, but it's very obvious to me, at least, that something's wrong with how the running backs, contracts are structured at their rookie deals and then not able to cash in on a paycheck now.
Yeah, the NFLPA is going to have to do something at some point. However, that new collective bargaining agreement was only signed a couple years ago. So I think that there's 5 or 7 years. It's a long time before they're going to be renegotiating the CBA. So it's it's going to be a little bit of a purgatory for this generation of running backs. It's just going to have to live with this. But then once we get to that next CBA, I think they're going to try and work on a solution. So they have some time here to kind of think about it, brainstorm, and propose things to the league. But currently speaking, it's a mess for the running backs. You see Dalvin Cook get cut. Derrick Henry was on the trade block at some point this offseason. Alvin Kamara is, kind of an afterthought in most NFL circles now. So it's just all the top running backs. They're struggling to get their money's worth. And I think that, again, it's just going to come down to a new negotiation in the next CBA to fix this problem.
Absolutely. Now, going back to we mentioned Jason Pinnock, and I wanted to mention another former Jet, Leonard Williams. It feels like that trade to me ended up feeling like a win-win for both sides. The Giants got someone who ended up staying. It wasn't originally thought of if he would end up being there long term, and ended up working out that way. And the Jets get it was a third and a fifth. They end up drafting Ashton Davis in the third round, which that seems like a wash. He's kind of more of a special teamer. But Michael Carter the second, I mean, this is their starting slot corner and is a part of a really good, cornerback trio here. That one feels like a win-win. Wouldn't you agree?
I'd say so. I mean, Leonard Williams, when the trade was made, I wasn't thrilled about it. I thought it was too much to invest into an interior defensive lineman. But we've seen a little bit of a change in the league. Back then, a few years ago, defensive linemen were kind of in that running back stage where they weren't getting paid and, the contracts weren't really proving to have much value. But now you see Dexter Lawrence, the impact that he had on the team, him and Leonard Williams playing together. You got to keep those guys paired up because they really do play off of each other. Williams is as good as he is because he's playing next to Lawrence, and vice versa for Lawrence. So I'm happy that he's still here, and he has been really good for the Giants. He had a career year a couple years ago with over 10 sacks, but this past season, a little banged up. I think he missed about 5 games. First time in his entire NFL career, though, that he's missed time with an injury. So I think that, when you're looking at Big Cat, he's an impact player. Yeah, the Giants are paying him an excessive amount of money, but he's in the final year of his contract. They were able to work out the salary cap where they didn't have to restructure him this year or extend him or anything. So let's wait and see. Does he start to decline this season? If he does, you can kind of just walk away without any penalty next year. But if he continues to play at a high level, you could probably extend him on a reasonable deal and just keep him and Dexter Lawrence playing alongside each other. So Big Cat, definitely a big player for the Giants defense.
Yeah, I love watching those two guys on the interior. And with Dexter Lawrence, I feel like he's always going to get the Quinnen Williams comparison. They came from the same draft, and both really dominant players. And it was good to see both those guys get paid, and they're deserving. They're drafted by their team, developed year over year. So I was glad to see both those guys get paid as well.
Yeah, 100%. And Quinnen Williams, for what it's worth, is one of my favorite players in the NFL that's not wearing a Giants jersey. Love his character, his personality. I just think that every time I see Hard Knocks or any interview that he's in, he finds a way to make me laugh. And he really is just a tremendous player, one of the NFL's elite defensive linemen and most impactful defenders. So him, Dexter Lawrence, there's some really good defensive linemen playing in the Big Apple right now. And you got to be excited about both of those guys.
Love it. Wanted to get your take on just where your expectations are for the Giants this year. Because last year, I think many and even Giants fans would agree, surprise season. I don't think anyone expected them to be in the playoffs. They win a playoff game, which is fantastic. Some are predicting a regression. Some think the Giants will still be a good team and a playoff team this year. Where do you land on that?
Yeah, those who are anticipating a regression, I think that's just because the Giants exceeded expectations so greatly last year. It's like, can they really do that over again? Can they really repeat with another successful season? And personally, I think that they can. They made a lot of improvements to their roster this offseason. They didn't have any changes on the coaching staff, which was huge. We had Wink Martindale, defensive coordinator, interviewing for head coaching jobs, made it to the final rounds with the Indianapolis Colts. And same thing goes for offensive coordinator Mike Kafka, who I don't think is going to be with the Giants very long. I think he's getting a head coaching job in the next season or two. So those two being back here, though, should elevate expectations for the Giants. The fact that they didn't lose one of their coordinators. Brian Dable is still leading this team, and they added Darren Waller, superstar tight end who's going to change this offense. They added talent on the defensive side of the ball as well. Bobby Okereke from the Indianapolis Colts. He should transform their run defense, which was putrid last year. So when you're looking at it, I think the Giants made a lot of necessary improvements. The roster is a lot better, but the schedule is a lot tougher. And that's where I think that instead of seeing this team improve by 3 to 4 wins, you're going to see them improve by maybe one. I have them going 10-7. I think that's realistic for them. It's about what they did last year, 9-7-1. Had they won that game against Washington, they are 10-7. So with the tie, but I think that they improved by one game. I probably would have them improving by 2 to 3 games based on going into the second year with this coaching staff, adding all this talent. But because this roster is so different, or the schedule rather is so difficult, I don't see them realistically improving their win total by too much. But it's in the realm of possibility. I won't discount it because, again, Darren Waller entering this offense is going to change this team. It's going to do a lot for Daniel Jones as he enters the second season with Kafka and Dable. But at the same time, it is a tough schedule. It's a tough division that the Giants play in. The NFC East is really good right now. So you could also see them taking that regression. It wouldn't shock me, but I am pretty high on them and confident this year that they can manage 9 to 10 wins.
There you go. Well, while you're on the show, I don't know if you saw that there's some breaking Giants news. They traded for Isaiah Simmons, the 7th round pick. Any rapid reaction to that?
Yeah, I just got a text about that. So let me see. 7th round pick in 2024. Okay, that's good value. We actually talked about this on the live stream last night. I went live on Fireside Giants, and one of the fans asked me about Isaiah Simmons, and I said I don't see this trade happening. I don't think it's realistic. So there you go. I got to eat my words, and I was wrong about that. But Isaiah Simmons, a player that I loved coming out of Clemson in that draft class, but one of those players who, where does he fit in, right? Because he's built like a safety linebacker hybrid. That's what he plays, but it's hard to fit those guys into your defense at the NFL level compared to the collegiate level. So this is a guy I don't see him helping us in the running game, but in terms of our pass coverage, guarding tight ends, that should be a huge boost. So I like Simmons a lot. I'm excited about this. It's really low risk, high reward here with a 7th round draft pick. So this is a thrilling move in my mind. And I'm excited to see if he's able to suit up this Saturday, and it's a pretty quick turnaround from getting traded, but it's possible. I'd like to see that, and if not, then I'll definitely be keeping a close eye on him as we get closer to the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. Saw that one pop up, so figured I'd get your take on it. But going back to the where the win total, I'm pretty much right in lockstep with you. I think they win 9 or 10 games and are pushing for a wild card spot this year. Daniel Jones's progression with Brian Dable to me has been really impressive. I know the touchdown passes weren't necessarily there last year. Maybe that's the next step in this process, but he looked like a totally different quarterback to me last year.
No, he did, and he really the part of his game that he really improved on was taking care of the football. That was the huge problem with him. His rookie season, I think it was like 20 fumbles, something absurd, double-digit interceptions. But this last year, only 5 interceptions. I think he only lost 5 fumbles as well. So those are pretty good numbers for an NFL quarterback. And the 5 interceptions, based on his attempts, 1.1% interception rate, led the NFL, the lowest percentage in the league. So if there's one thing that he improved on, it was keeping the football clean. And I like Daniel Jones. I'm a believer. Danny Dimes, I think he makes some big plays with his legs as well. That's an underrated aspect to his game. Rushed for over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. So you see a lot of fans around the NFL look at his 15 passing touchdowns and say, this guy stinks, can't get the ball in the end zone. But you add in the 7 rushing touchdowns and how many times he led them into the 5-yard line and Saquon Barkley punched it in. He produced a lot of points for the Giants. And there were games where, earlier I mentioned Saquon Barkley did carry the Giants to some wins, but that final month of the season where the Giants were winning games and clinched that playoff spot, Daniel Jones was carrying the team to wins. You go look at that Indianapolis game. He rushed for 2 touchdowns. He threw 2. Like, he was a dominant force in that game. That playoff game versus the Vikings as well was just a standout performance from him. And that was really the one that, for me, I was finally like, okay, he is a franchise quarterback if we continue to develop him the right way and get talent around him. But throughout his career, he hasn't had much talent around him outside of Saquon Barkley, who's also been injured for a lot of his career. So it'll be interesting to see him in this offense with Darren Waller, year 2 of Dable and Kafka. As I said, I think that he can take another big step forward. And I'm really high on Daniel Jones this year. I think, if you're into fantasy football, he's a sleeper. If you see him one of those late rounds, take Jones. He's got the rushing ability. He's got the new offense around him and the new playmakers. So I like Jones. I'm expecting big things from him. Is he going to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL? Probably not, but top 10 to me is a realistic possibility.
Yeah, I could see it if he continues to progress that way, as you mentioned, with some more weapons around him. Hawk's got a good point that I'm sure you'll love. He says, honestly, I think the Giants are going to surprise some people this year. I think they will look something like the Bills when they popped 2 years ago, NFC is weak. Definitely NFC, definitely a weaker conference to me. After the Eagles, it's pretty wide open. So I'm sure you would sign up for a Bills like a step up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Bills are always the comparison with the Giants since Joe Shane and Brian Dable came to town. They came over from the Buffalo Bills. So you see a lot of similarities in the way that the Giants are constructing their roster to the way that the Bills did before they did pop off a couple years ago. So it's reasonable. You could see it happening. And one thing about the NFC East that is interesting, I want to say since 2010, there hasn't been a repeat winner of the division. It's every single year there's a new winner of the division. So everybody's locking in the Eagles to win that division. But I will say, historically speaking, they should not end up winning the division because they won it last year. It's just been every single year there's been a new winner in the NFC East. So again, I think that the Eagles, pains me to say it, they have top 3 roster in the NFL right now. So I do think they're going to win the division and break that streak. But outside of that, it's wide open in the NFC. The Giants were one of 3 NFC East teams that made it to the postseason, and I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility to think that that happens once again, with Dallas also still having a strong roster, Philadelphia being the team that they are, and the Giants really do look like a team that could take a big step forward here.
Absolutely. Johnny says more of a Jets one, but if Aaron Rodgers comes out and throws a touchdown pass, does he just walk off and is done? For me, I didn't want him suiting up in this game anyway to begin with, because we mentioned at the top of the show, Giants aren't playing starters, and just weird vibes with that. But I would hope so. If the opening offense comes out and scores a touchdown on the first drive, I would hope that they would be done. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happens. If he throws a touchdown bomb, I think that the drive should just end there, or his game should just end there. That's what the Giants did with Daniel Jones last week, for what it's worth. They had him go out there for the first drive. He lit it up. He looked phenomenal, and they scored a touchdown, and then he was done for the day. And that's fine, because what that did for Jones gives him that confidence going into the regular season. He just put together a beautiful drive, executed well, threw the ball to his new playmaker, Darren Waller, got a touchdown to the second-year kid and Daniel Bellinger. So Daniel Jones looked confident, looked decisive, and looked like he's ready to take a step forward. So that's all you needed there. Just give Jones a little bit of confidence, show off his skills to the league, put the league on notice. And I think that's what you're going to see with Aaron Rodgers. He probably goes out there, puts off to a really nice scoring drive against the Giants backups, and then that's pretty much all you need to see of him. It's not like Rodgers really has much to prove at this stage in his NFL career, so he doesn't need any playing time against this Giants backup team. So I agree with you. I think he goes out there, scores a touchdown, and then he's probably done.
Absolutely. So I'm definitely looking forward to this one. Anthony, I want to thank you so much for coming on and joining me today. Where can people find your stuff if they want to follow along?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. You can follow me on Twitter/X at Anthony_Rivardo. And check us out over on EmpireSportsMedia.com. That's where we write articles. I cover the Giants in written format as well, but we also cover the Knicks, the Yankees, and all the other New York sports teams. Not the Jets right now, but we will soon. So check us out, EmpireSportsMedia.com, and Fireside Giants is my YouTube. So check me out there.
Absolutely. So for Anthony, I am Matt O'Leary. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll talk to you next time.